Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everyone, Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Harry Sethi. They don't get much bigger, much more blockbuster, much more heavyweight than this. Sunday's game against Manchester City might not prove to be decisive in terms of the 90 minutes, but from now on until the final whistle, it may as well feel that way. So the two best club sides in the world go head-to-head this weekend with a point separating them as they grapple for a firmer grip on the Premier League title. Win, and Liverpool's destiny is in their own hands. Win, and glory is just 7 games and 21 points away. So no pressure, Redman. On the pod this week, to help us gain a better insight into just how City fans view this latest incarnation of Guardiola's side, how the season's unfolded so far, and how they're feeling ahead of this Sunday's huge clash at the Etihad, we welcome back content editor for OneFootball and contributor to the Blue Moon podcast, Dan Burke. Welcome back, Dan.
Hello.
Good to speak with you, as always. We're just chatting ahead of me hitting record on just the nerves that slowly sort of build themselves up ahead of this game, and at different stages throughout the season and in past seasons as well. It's, this game has sort of flitted in and out of being, as relevant as it feels like it will be this weekend, given how close the teams are in the table at the moment. But before we get to any of that and to sort of maybe having a broader look at the season, I know when I last had you on ahead of the previous game at Anfield, we were speaking about your sort of expectations of the season, and sort of what you're hoping for from this particular City squad, and this incarnation from Guardiola. I suppose that's an interesting place to start in terms of what your expectations were at the start of the season, and then how they've evolved as you've seen this side evolve this season.
Yeah, it's been a funny season, really. I mean, there was a point where it wasn't looking too great for us. A very brief period, at least. I remember we lost 2-0 at home to Crystal Palace at the end of October.
Yeah,
that was a day when I thought maybe we're not going to be good enough to win the league this season. And I remember coming out. I was actually at the Etihad, one of my rare appearances when I make it over to Manchester that day. I came out of the game and I saw on the TV screens on the concourse that Liverpool had drawn 2-2 with Brighton the same day.
Oh yeah.
So that was a little bit like, oh okay, we've dropped points, but so have they. So maybe it's not such a lost cause after all. But after that game, we went on a big long run of picking up results. We went unbeaten for quite a long time until we lost at home to Spurs a few weeks ago. And there was a point, around Christmas time when it looked like City had really pulled away from the contenders and were streaking away at the top of the league, and it looked like the league was in the bag. I never truly believed that we'd won it, but there was a part of me that thought we probably had won it, and we probably did have it in the bag, and we didn't have an awful lot to worry about. The main reason being that I didn't think Liverpool were going to put together a run of results like they have done. I assumed Liverpool would drop a few points at some point in the start of 2022, and that hasn't happened so far. And our results haven't been too bad at all, really. We lost that game at Spurs, as I mentioned. We drew away at Southampton. We drew away at Crystal Palace. And those pretty minor amount of drop points as combined with Liverpool's winning run has led to a situation whereby we're going into this weekend's game with just 1 point separating the two teams, and suddenly that league that was in the bag around Christmas time is very precarious now. There's a lot of jeopardy around that, and this weekend's game will no doubt have a big say in who ends up winning the title. The fact that we're also competing on other fronts is good. We could still technically win the treble if everything goes right. I don't see that happening personally. I think we're going to drop at least one trophy along the way. Which one it is, I don't know yet. But to be in contention for 3 trophies at this point in the season is is great. Really, it'd be even better if we'd done what you've done and won the League Cup and would be in contention for 4 trophies. We've been in that position a couple of times before and never quite made it over the line with the quadruple, as nobody ever has. And it'll be interesting to see if Liverpool can do that this season. But yeah, I think at this point in the year, it's early April and we're in contention for 3 trophies. You'd have to say it's been a very good season for City so far. It could end up being a spectacular season, or it could end up being a bit of a washout if we win nothing. But everything's up in the air, and I'm quite excited about what's to come. Let's embrace the chaos.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting to hear those who make a lot of the whole, treble or quadruple, and I think it's you probably would expect it, but I've enjoyed that Klopp has basically been saying, well, no, it doesn't happen, and there's a reason why it doesn't happen, because you need everything to go perfectly, and the schedule, makes it almost impossible. So, I mean, I've been on some very bullish podcasts where after big wins you come out and go, yeah, come on, of course it's going to be the quadruple or whatever. Yeah. But I'm sure, as you were saying, it's just it's like wins like that are so incredibly difficult to pull off. It's the reason why they don't happen so often. So I'm enjoying that it's mathematically and sort of technically still possible, because it does feel for many seasons when Liverpool's squad hasn't been as strong as it currently feels, and I'm sure we'll get onto that. We've had to throw 1 or 2 competitions by the wayside a little bit and play some of the younger players and things like that. So it's interesting that both sides find themselves in with a chance to win a huge sort of trophy haul by the end of the season as well. And I suppose the reason why I started on expectations, and you were talking about the consistency there, and you mentioned that sticky patch, and I'm just looking at this fixture list in front of me, huge swaths of green, sort of W by both sides here, and a couple of sort of dots of red, where I'm sure if I went back, people lost their minds around those dots of red whenever it happened. But I think, just to prove the point, I think it's 1 loss in their last 21 games in all competitions for Liverpool, and 1 loss in the last 22 for Man City, for example. Yeah. So it's ridiculous levels of consistency from these two sides. And I think, we'll definitely come on to talk about sort of how Liverpool have managed to iron things out a little bit, because there was definitely a point in the season where I felt this side wasn't really built to win a league title, because they never really had control on games in the way in which they've managed to get a grip of in the last few weeks, largely because Thiago has been fit and Van Dijk's back seemingly to his best. But the reason why I wanted to start with expectations was I'm interested in your opinion and sort of City fans that you've spoken to, just around where you guys rate this current incarnation of City really against sort of Guardiola's previous incarnations, the teams you've had beforehand under him. And it's an interesting one for me, because I feel like there are Liverpool fans at the moment who are looking at this Liverpool squad, actually, this incarnation of Klopp's Liverpool, and they probably, I think more than most, are actually saying, this is probably the best actually that he's had, whether or not they end up winning things or whatever. So how do you rate this current incarnation? Because it's a slightly different side with I suppose, without some of those talismans you've had in the past.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I would say that the sort of peak Guardiola team in his time at City has been the one that won the league in 18-19, when we pipped Liverpool to it by 1 point, and we got 98 points, you got 97 points, and it's a kind of similar season, but I don't think we're quite as good now as we were back then. Mainly because we had Sergio Aguero up front, who was an incredible striker, as everybody knows, and one of those players who could turn nothing into a goal. And we don't really have an awful lot of players like that. We don't have a number 9 at the moment, which has not been a huge problem for us so far, and is a problem that hopefully will be finally addressed in the summer. But it does worry you sometimes that you do kind of wonder, despite the fact that we do score quite a lot of goals, you do sometimes wonder when we play against teams with a low block, or teams who are just going to defend well, where our goals are going to come from. That was the case when we played Crystal Palace a few weeks ago, where we did miss a fair few chances, but just couldn't get the ball in the net ultimately. And you do wonder if we'd signed Harry Kane last summer, or Erling Haaland or someone like that, if that would turn this a result like that into a win. But for all intents and purposes, City are a very, very good side. We have mastered the art of playing without a striker in many ways, and we have some incredibly talented players who have had really good seasons. We play some lovely football at times, and I do understand why people think that City can be a little bit boring to watch sometimes. Watching us pass teams to death isn't very entertaining for the neutral and isn't very entertaining for City fans sometimes, to be perfectly honest. But there are games when we come up against big teams like Liverpool, good teams, where we can hold our own against them, more than hold our own, and that's always good to see. And we can adapt to playing teams like Burnley, like we did at the weekend as well, and beat those sort of teams. So it's a very good side with a very good manager, and we've got a lot to be feeling confident about heading into the end of the season. But there is still that niggling doubt that maybe if we had a striker, things would be a little bit more, had gone a little bit smoother for us this season. The other thing that does concern us somewhat is that we don't have a great deal of depth in certain areas, which probably sounds a bit preposterous given the amount of money that we've spent on our squad. But, we've got Rodri as the holding midfield player, and the backup to him is Fernandinho, who has been a fantastic servant to us and a great player for us over the years, but is showing his age a bit this season and has really seen better days. And I've been worrying all season what would happen if Rodri got an injury, because I think he's so crucial to us. João Cancelo is another really crucial player to us that if he were to get injured for any length of time, we would have a big problem on our hands, because we've basically got three fullbacks for a position where you'd ideally like two for each side. And Zinchenko doesn't play an awful lot, so it's mainly just Cancelo and Walker. And Cancelo has been outstanding for us this season again, and been one of our best players. And yeah, you do worry sometimes whether that lack of depth might catch up with us. And if anything's going to prevent us from winning 3 trophies this season, it's going to be that. But it could well prevent us from winning any trophies. That's the worry. And I compare that to Liverpool, and Liverpool haven't spent as much as City on their team. But I do think you have a bit better depth than us in a lot of areas. You've got 4 quality forward players, you've got decent options in fullback areas, you've got decent options in midfield. I think when you put the 2 squads on paper, I think Liverpool do actually have the deeper of the 2 squads, weirdly enough. So that would be my worry about this team, and the thing that perhaps holds me back from saying that they are the greatest incarnation of Guardiola's tenure. But if we go on to win the treble, then it's going to be hard to make that argument. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's just an interesting one, because you see these sides breaking records and doing crazy things, and then you look at them, and then certainly when I look at the City side as well, I mean, there are stars there for sure, and I think when I look at it right now, probably the ones I'd pick out would be, Cancelo, like you mentioned, De Bruyne are still capable of doing the incredible Foden, and his increasing influence on the side as well. And then maybe one of the defenders in terms of sort of having that ability as well. Bernardo Silva has that from time to time, but I just don't think he's maybe as present or as high a ceiling as a couple of those other ones. But compared to City teams of the past, you're right. There were some real big talismans there that you could think of, and even when you were mentioning Aguero, I was thinking of the likes of David Silva as well in the past, and Company and some of those bigger figures in the side who, it's weird. It's almost like you've got players who are doing the same roles and actually performing at a really, really high level, but maybe because they're not the names, or they don't quite have the personalities or whatever, it feels as though they're perhaps not the same level of player, but actually they are doing they're performing at that same level as well. So, and I was looking at the lineup actually, because I think you mentioned sort of that lack of a number 9, and I'm sure people really enjoyed the Tottenham City game, just so they get to sort of make that point relentlessly over and over. And Harry Kane certainly inserted himself into a lot of columns throughout the evening. But I was struck by when City came to Liverpool, the decision to play with Grealish as a false 9 almost in that game, which was kind of an interesting one, which I don't think particularly, I didn't think it particularly worked that well on the day. But I just wanted to ask you sort of what you thought of that game, because I thought City played very, very well in that game for large stretches. Obviously, I think that was a game where Liverpool had Milner instead of Trent at right back, which was had a few very hairy moments, which I would definitely admit he was lucky to get away with. And there was no Thiago in midfield, I suppose, as well. There was no Luis Diaz at that point as well, which is a luxury. But the Milner at right back thing was the thing that I thoroughly didn't enjoy. But what did you make of that game, and sort of how Guardiola approached Liverpool? Because he's had different ways of dealing with that sort of that task of going to Anfield in the past.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the main reason that that Grealish played as the false nine that day was because Milner was right back, and he wanted to have Foden running at Milner.
Exactly.
And he gave him a pretty torrid time, and yeah, it was an interesting game because I felt like in many ways we kind of shed that little inferiority complex that we've had at Anfield over the years. You know, it's been a horrible ground for us to visit. We've had, you know, some awful games there and a really awful record there, and I don't even really count the one that we won during the pandemic season because I think the crowd at Anfield that always has such an influence on City that to beat Liverpool there without fans almost felt like it didn't really count. So to go there earlier this season and play well, start the game really well, and you know, I thought we were by far the better team in the first half, and probably should have had a couple of goals, and it was a bit frustrating to go in at 0-0.
Mm-hmm.
And then Liverpool organised themselves a bit better in the dressing room at half time, I think, and came out and started the second half really well. Salah scores that incredible goal, and you're thinking, oh God, here we go again, another Anfield nightmare. To then get back into the game with Foden equalising, then to go behind again, and then get back into the game. I thought City showed a lot of character that day, which, you know, like I said, we've not seen that at Anfield too often, and that was quite encouraging. So in the end, I was kind of happy with the draw, but there was still a sense that it was a bit of a missed opportunity. And yeah, I don't think Paul Tierney, the referee, had a very good game that day, to be perfectly honest with you. So
yes, delighted he's got a second chance.
yeah, exactly. He's the VAR this weekend.
He is, yes.
Yeah. So
good Paul.
Yeah. I know Klopp's had words with him this season as well. So
yes, he is. Yeah,
we united in our dislike of that. Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a good and encouraging performance in some ways, a little disappointing in other ways, but yeah, I feel like maybe we're getting to grips with playing Anfield a little bit better, at the very least.
Yeah, I agree on that, especially sort of. I think you look at certain players as well, and I think that so much has been spoken about him, and I think we'll definitely come on to talk about him more around how his season's been. But you could certainly see the likes of Foden, you know, on that day. Absolutely, yeah, he doesn't have those scars in the past of sort of those difficult, well, not many of those difficult evenings at Anfield, and showed absolutely no sort of like tendency to sort of shrink in that atmosphere as well, as we've seen other players do in the past. I know Sterling's always had a hard time there. Aguero had that sort of weird record there as well. Just complete inability to score at Anfield, which was ridiculous given his records elsewhere. But there do seem to be a couple of players in that side now who they're unaffected by some of those hoodoos that have existed in the past. And actually, I thought it was an interesting game as well, because for me, the issue with Liverpool this season and why I was sort of doubting whether they could be a league-winning side was because there were too many games that they were getting involved with, certainly in the first half of the season, where yes, they could blow their way into like a 2-3-0 lead or whatever. Salah was on incredible form, as were some of the others as well. But then they never really grabbed a hold, unless a side just got dispirited and stopped trying. They didn't necessarily control games on the ball that well, and especially when you were dealing with a side like City, who so strong in midfield and are going to assert themselves on you. I thought that was a good example at Anfield, where you have Henderson there, you have Fabinho, but you're probably just missing one, whether it be Keita, whether it be Thiago, to actually help tick things over, not get too panicked when the sort of the press comes in. And that's been the issue this season. I think back to that Chelsea game as well, where you're 2-0 up and then you can't hold on to things. It seemed to be that was the way. So really, I mean, for me with this game this weekend, the one thing I've been looking forward to, regardless of what this game would have meant, was I just wanted Thiago, Fabinho, and whoever it might be, Keita, or I reckon it'll be Henderson. Just all of them fully fit, everyone fully fit on both sides, and then just go at it and see what happens. I think that's always what you want, right? And good to see Trent's back as well. In terms of the season and how it's gone, then, I mean, we spoke a little bit about Foden there, but I just wanted to know, are there key players who've emerged throughout the season as sort of real leaders or focal points in the side, or are there players who've even sort of reasserted themselves? And I think this season I've been struck, looking from the outside in, by Foden a lot, by Mahrez a great deal as well. It seemed in the early half of the season Bernardo Silva was sort of turning back the clock a little bit to some of his best work. And then of late, it looks like De Bruyne is now fully fit and gliding through the pitch.
Yeah. I would say all of those. I would add Rodri to the list as well. I mentioned him a bit earlier. He was having some monstrous performances in the early start of the season, really dominating midfields, really, really superb. He has dipped a little bit in recent weeks. I think the demands of the season have just caught up with him a little bit. He plays pretty much every game for City and plays for Spain quite a lot as well these days as well. So I think it's just affected him a little bit, but he's still been pretty consistent and pretty good. And the ones you mentioned as well, Bernardo Silva. What's interesting about him is that he wanted to leave City last summer because I think the pandemic had been quite hard on him. He's from Lisbon, living in Manchester, and it's raining all the time, and I think it just affected him mentally a little bit, not being able to see his family and friends a little bit. And I think he would have been quite happy for a move to Spain, but for some reason just never materialised last summer. None of the big Spanish clubs came in for him, and he ended up staying at City. And for a lot of players, they might use that as an excuse to kind of sulk a little bit and go into the shell, but he's just come out and had his best season as a City player so far. He's been absolutely superb. A little bit inconsistent at times. That there are times when he sort of ebbs and flows, and sometimes he's brilliant, sometimes he can be a little bit quiet, but at the moment we're seeing him on a bit of an upward trajectory again, which is good. And Mahrez is another one who's been outstanding for us. I think he's our top scorer, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's got over 20 goals in all competitions now, which has really helped with that lack of a number 9 chipping in with goals. Sterling is a player who, again, around January time, there was looking like he might be leaving. There was some talk that he might be attracting the interest of Barcelona and wasn't getting a game for City. There was some talk that he'd fell out with Guardiola, and he's back in the picture now and is starting games quite regularly and playing really well again. So he's been really good. And De Bruyne, he ended the last season on a really sad note when he had to go off injured in the Champions League final. Then he got injured playing for Belgium at the Euros, and he started the season really, really poorly. That Crystal Palace game I mentioned earlier, I remember him getting taken off in that game, and I was delighted that he'd been taken off, which is something I never thought I would say about Kevin De Bruyne, because he's been such a consistent, brilliant player for us, but he was just not in form at all. And I was almost starting to think, have we seen the best of Kevin De Bruyne? He's 30 now. His best days are behind him. Is he over his peak now? And he's come back in recent weeks and been really good again. When we beat United a few weeks ago, he was outstanding in that game. And yeah, there's nobody who's had a bad season really. Ruben Dias is really important for us. He's been out injured for a few weeks, and John Stones and Aymeric Laporte have been playing really well in his absence. João Cancelo's been really good. Kyle Walker's really good when he's not getting stupid red cards for no reason.
Who are the leaders in the City side as well? In terms of I mean, it's hard to compare them with some of the figures from the past because they're so well established. But I mean, who have you seen, even if they've not got the armband, who you think you can see other players looking to, like, in difficult moments?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, Fernandinho is the captain, but he barely plays. So the sort of de facto captain is Gundogan, and he's a player who, he kind of comes in and out of the team, but I always feel a lot more confident when he's on the pitch. I feel a lot calmer. He brings a calming presence and a lot of experience, and a bit like Thiago for you guys. I think he's that sort of slows things down and encourages people to kind of keep their heads when they might be losing them and that kind of thing. And then I think next on the list for the captaincy is Dias, and he's a big leader. He came in, really settled really well in the Premier League last season, really quickly, and has just been almost like Vincent Kompany-esque for us, really. He's been that level of performance and leadership. And then I think you would say De Bruyne is next on the list, but it's kind of interesting. I think a lot of teams have this kind of like little group of captains, where there's 3 or 4 of them who are in this little group, and they're the leadership team. And De Bruyne, he was last season the kind of vice captain, and he seems to have slipped down the pecking order a little bit now, which is interesting. And Gundogan seems to have taken that role, and Dias as well. So I'd say it's those two mainly, Gundogan and Dias, with Fernandinho being the actual captain who sorts everything out in the dressing room, but doesn't play an awful lot anymore. Yeah,
it's interesting, that one, because I think with Liverpool it was always, I mean, Henderson's had the captaincy for a long time, but I think very frequently you look on the pitch and it's hard to look past Van Dijk at times, because he's just, especially now, I think in a similar way to De Bruyne, you can sort of see some of these players who you can see have maybe gotten over whatever sort of residual injuries they've had, or anxiety about an injury or whatever it might be. But there were definitely points at the start of the season where you could see there were a couple of types of movements that Van Dijk was sort of struggling with a little bit, and I think Griezmann had a lot of fun with those during some of the early stage group games in the Champions League. But I can't remember exactly when it was. Maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago that you could just tell a switch had been flicked and he was back basically to sort of the way in which he'd been before. And yeah, I think from that point you can just see all these players looking. And there's this great video of Luis Diaz when he signed as well, and he's making his way around the ground, and I think he just meets Virgil or whatever. And he's like, this man's massive. He's huge. And the coaches are like, yeah, no, he is. That's what I'd like to say. I think even just by being physically imposing like Diaz is, for example, that's at times you probably carried that authority. But yeah, interesting what you mentioned there around Gundogan and some of the comparison with Thiago, and they're both obviously very fun players to just watch on the ball and off the ball anyway. But one you mentioned there in Foden that we'd already talked about, his increasing influence on the side, and because he's probably even worth talking about the game last night as well. And you knew what you were going to get when you drew out Atletico Madrid. Sort of maybe couldn't have predicted just how cynical they would be at times, but how was the game last night? And I'm led to believe that Phil Foden really asserted himself in that game and was obviously instrumental in you eventually getting that breakthrough. But just talk a bit about that game, Phil Foden, and then I suppose how his role is evolving and for City this season.
Yeah. Well, it was a very odd game in that not unexpectedly that Atletico came to park the bus basically and grind out a result. And I think even a 1-0 defeat is probably not too bad from their point of view, really. But they've had they basically offered nothing. But Guardiola described it as a 5-5 formation in the post-match press conference, and that was basically it. And I saw some quotes from De Bruyne before we started recording, actually, where he was saying that it was like a handball game where you have to like go around. You can't go straight through the middle of the defence. You always have to go around. And just that it was one of the most sort of intense low blocks I've ever seen. And City dominated the ball. I think they had over 70% possession. Didn't create an awful lot, and were struggling to create things until Foden came on in the second half. And it was quite interesting that he started the game on the bench, and I think it was probably because Guardiola wanted to keep him a bit fresh for the game at the weekend. And I think it was also because now and again he tries to get Bernardo Silva, Gundogan and De Bruyne into the same team, and it doesn't work brilliantly well, and it means having to sacrifice one of the forward players and usually playing Bernardo as the false nine, which doesn't suit him brilliantly as far as I'm concerned. So that meant that Foden started on the bench, and as the sort of second half ticked on, I was thinking we're not going to get a goal here. We need a bit of fresh impetus from the bench. Get Foden on. He puts Foden on. Within 80 seconds, he's assisted the goal, and we're 1-0 up. And then he had a couple of other really nice runs into the box. He's just like kind of youthful enthusiasm to take players on, and so he's got such quick feet, such incredible awareness of space and where people are, and an incredible intelligence to create chances and drive into the box like that. And that was what we were missing in that game last night, and that's what he brings, and that's why if I was the manager, he'd be one of the first names on the team sheet for me every week. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and it's getting better and better. And
so he is a forward though in terms of his role at the moment. His best position would be out on the left hand side, did you say?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because he plays often down the middle nowadays, and again it's about trying to get the forward line balanced in that Riyad Mahrez pretty much always plays on the right, and then it's a bit of a toss up between who plays centrally and who plays on the left. At the moment it seems to be Sterling or Grealish will occupy that left position, and Foden plays down the middle. For me personally, I think he is a very, very dynamic winger, and I'll be interested to see what he would do against a defender like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who has got pace and power himself, and would certainly be a bit better at dealing with him than I think James Milner would. So I'd be interested to see Foden come up against a proper solid right back like that and see what he can do. But I suspect he will probably play down the middle this weekend.
Interesting. Okay.
And he did that against United a few weeks ago, and United are trash at the moment, but he really was pulling their defence all over the place, dropping deep and creating space for others. So he can do a bit of everything, really. He's just a fantastic player. He can even play a bit deeper. You see him play for England sometimes. He's played a bit of a deep line playmaker. He's got a bit of that as well. So he's just a fantastic player. We're so lucky that our academy has produced this player, because I think he's probably going to be. It will go down in history as one of the best players to ever come through the City youth setup. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be an interesting battle between those two as well. I think him and Trent, I think, would both be described as sort of generational talents from both academies, and some of the stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's very similar with Foden, to be honest, but because I felt the same way when I've watched him as a rival fan. But there were some points last night as well with Trent where just some of the stuff he was doing was absolutely ridiculous from right back. So it's going to be a really fascinating contest
and
as well.
The cliche about Trent as well is that he can't defend, isn't
No,
it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's rubbish.
I remember we played you in the Champions League when you knocked us out a few years ago, and I remember seeing Leroy Sané in the team for us up against him. Yeah. He's going to have a field day against Trent today, and Trent Alexander-Arnold had him in his pocket the whole game, I think. So he can defend. It's nonsense, that, isn't it? I think
it's just interesting that I think people probably forget that. I mean, one, that he's so young, but then also that he's pretty much played everybody at this stage in his career in terms of some of the top sides and going to the Champions League. So there have been plenty of games where if he was rubbish at defending, he people would have established that in a very emphatic way, because he's played against nearly all of the players who could terrorize a right back in those positions. And yeah, I think early days there were definitely some moments where he was getting used to, hang on, you want me to play how aggressively? And then he's sort of got adjusted to that. Looks like he's more sort of physically stronger than he was, and so a bit more capable of dealing with that stuff. I think I would definitely I wouldn't try and hide that this knock he picked up ahead of international duty was a classic, Alex Ferguson style. Oh yeah, sorry, he's picked up that. He's absolutely fine. I don't believe there was anything wrong with him at all, to be honest. I think he just had a rest, but I've got no issues with us doing that. But in terms of looking at the season, I mean, I've been asking everybody who's been come on actually just to, if they were looking at their side and how the season's gone, and obviously it's gone really well for City. Are there games throughout the season that you would pick out and go, that's a really good example of how this City side has evolved throughout the season, and that was a good example of when everything clicks? And is there? I mean, I suppose the only examples we can give of when it doesn't click is the Tottenham game or the Palace game more recently, where it's just that finishing touch. But if you had to pick two that sort of sum it up, which ones would they be?
I reckon probably the Chelsea away game in September, really early in the season. That was just before we played Liverpool at Anfield, and I think I can't remember if I spoke to you before or after that last time. But
it was before, yeah.
Yeah, but so that was like a really daunting week for us, where we had Chelsea away, PSG away, and Liverpool away, 3 games in succession in the space of a few days. And the Chelsea game, I went into that thinking, not feeling particularly confident. We'd drawn at home to Southampton the game before that, 0-0 draw at home, weren't in terrific form, and I was thinking this is kind of a make or break game for our season. This is going to define the rest of the season today. Obviously Chelsea had beaten us in the Champions League final, the FA Cup semi-final, and the league the previous season, so it was almost a bit like, has Tuchel got Pep's number here? Is this going to be a problem for us going forward? And we went to Stamford Bridge and were absolutely superb from first whistle to last. We dominated the ball. We were pressing them right onto the edge of their own area. They couldn't get out. They couldn't get the ball. We won 1-0. It probably should have been 3 or 4-0 on the balance of play. And it was just a superb performance that made me think, bloody hell, we're actually a really good team here. And we might have a good season after all. My doubts were, a lot of them were kind of assuaged that day. And then, we followed that up with a defeat against PSG and a draw at Liverpool. But that was the moment that I realised that actually we were, producing something special, and it could be a special season. That Spurs game is probably an example of things going pretty badly wrong for us. I don't think we were that bad that day, but you can often tell with City within about 4 or 5 minutes of the game how it's going to go, and you could just tell that there was just something a little bit off about them that day. They went a goal down pretty early on after a few minutes. Ruben Dias making a bit of an uncharacteristic error, and then got back into the game, made it 1-1, and you think, okay, we'll kick on and win here with a better team. And then to let Spurs go 2-1 up, almost 3-1 up, win off a VAR, and we just looked pretty shambolic defensively, really. And at that point in the season, there was no real pressure on us as there is at this moment in time. It still felt like we were kind of coasting towards the end of the season. We'd beaten Chelsea at home a few weeks previously, and we're looking really good for the title. Still a pretty healthy lead. And that was the moment where I thought, actually, maybe this at the end of the season is going to be more of a struggle than we think. And yeah, to equalise late on like we did, and then still lose the game was really frustrating. So yeah, it's been a mostly good season, but there have been a few concerning moments like that where, and like you said earlier, that was a great example of a lot of the times when we've had setbacks this season. People have said, "Oh, if only we had a striker, it would have been different." And it's easy to sort of hone in on bad results like that and say things like that. But when you zoom out on the whole season and see that we're still top of the league, we've scored quite a lot of goals. We've got 70 goals in the Premier League this season. It's not been too bad.
It's not been a bad one, yeah. I don't think it's been you can't have too many complaints. I imagine, at the same time where people are pointing out, this would be different if there was a striker there. This shows you what a striker gives you and things like that. I suppose at the same time, attention gets turned to Jack Grealish at those points as well. But given the money that was spent on him and the fact that he's come in and under so much attention, so much focus, even before signing those Gucci deals, he's already getting plenty of attention. How have you found him this season in terms of what you knew of him before he joined, or how he's adapted to what he's being asked to do by Guardiola, and what is he being asked to do by Guardiola? Would you say that he's satisfying sort of those expectations of the manager in terms of his role in the side? And we can put the money to one side for a minute. I think that's obviously not his fault, but I'm just interested what you make of the signing and how well he's doing the job he's been asked to do.
Yeah, he's been okay. I would say, which is for £100 billion. There's no getting away from it.
There isn't.
Better than okay, wouldn't you? And what is kind of reassuring to me is that there is a bit of a pattern of players taking a bit of time to settle into Guardiola's teams. What's expected of you. It's quite different to what a lot of players will have experienced before. Certainly different to what Grealish was experiencing playing for Aston Villa, and it's taken him a bit of time. And he has shown some very encouraging signs and had some good games. He's never really had any terrible games. He's just been okay, and people are getting on his back because of the price tag, which is to be expected. And even City fans are starting to think, well, why do we spend 100 million on this guy and not 150 million on Harry Kane, for example? We needed a striker more than we needed Grealish. Why did we do that? A lot of people have been asking those questions. I think if he's still just okay next season, then it might be time to worry. But Riyad Mahrez took a long time to settle under Pep. His first season was very underwhelming as well, and his second season he really kicked on and was really good and has been one of our best players this season. So I'm hoping and half expecting that Grealish will be an awful lot better next season, and it's not a big concern of ours really that he hasn't truly set the world alight yet. In terms of what he's been asked to do, that's kind of different to what he's done before. He's playing in a slightly different position. I remember when we signed him, there was some talk that he was signed to kind of partner De Bruyne in those kind of two number 8 positions.
Right. Okay.
And he's not played in that position once for us so far. He's either played out on the left, which he can be a little bit predictable. He's cutting in onto his right foot all the time. Defenders can read him quite easily. He's not got that kind of turn of pace really that enables him to burst past players and take players on. So often he tends to slow things down a little bit, which can be a little bit frustrating. That's something I think he'll just get a little bit sharper at knowing, how many touches he needs to take. He's probably taken a few too many touches sometimes, and he'll form a greater understanding with the players around him. I would personally prefer to see him playing as the false 9 a little bit more. I think that suits him a little bit better, suits his game a little bit better. And then that opens up the left flank for Foden or Sterling, players who do have that pace to take players on and offer us a bit more width. So I don't think Guardiola has truly worked out what he wants to do with Grealish yet. He has been very complimentary to him whenever he's been asked about him, but Pep can be very disingenuous about those things. He never really says what he's truly thinking in press conferences and interviews. And I'd imagine that he's probably quietly confident that Grealish is going to go on to be a great player for us, but at this moment in time, there is a bit of a question mark about him, and I certainly don't see us selling him anytime soon. I imagine we'll give him, a couple more years to try and fulfil his potential, and And I'm sure his commercial, the revenue that he's bringing in off the pitch is the club's like accountants and that kind of stuff. But yeah, he's been okay. That's all I would say about him so far.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. That I couldn't think of games where he's been bad per se. It was just that you're always thinking of, I guess what you're expecting for an outlay like that, and also in a position where, as you say, there's a couple of players who could probably play in maybe his favoured, his natural position, and and it was just a slightly weird signing, but I'm interested to see how he does it. And you're right to draw some comparisons there. There were some players who took a bit of time to settle in, and Liverpool have had some sort of similar signings to that they've definitely not all worked the way in which Luis Diaz has of late, which is sort of a hilarious thing that he can barely speak English and yet seems to be completely on board with what's going on, and I have no idea how he communicates with Robbo, but it seems to be the best connection he's got on the entire pitch, so something they're doing must be working for sure. So I mean, in terms of Guardiola, I mean, you mentioned in there, and I was thinking about that. I can't remember if it was this season or last season, but that that interview that he did where he answers more than you can believe, more than you can. I both find it funny and also I thoroughly enjoy it at times. Actually, that he can be a little bit petty, a bit disingenuous, as you mentioned. In terms of how he's done this season, I think it's an interesting question around. I think people looked at Guardiola and went, well, you're going beyond this certain time frame at a club. How are you going to evolve things? It's a different kind of task. We haven't necessarily seen him in this role for this duration of time, and effectively rebuilding a side the way in which he has done. I mean, how have you found him this season as well in terms of almost his comfort level in the job? Is his comfort level in the league? He seems more comfortable than ever in terms of sort of handling the sort of stuff that usually gets thrown his way. I'm sure I'd seen stuff already about overthinking it in the Champions League and him batting those questions away and stuff like that. I mean, how have you found him this season?
Well, it's always funny that overthinking thing that got asked to him before the
Atletico
Madrid game, and he gave a pretty funny answer to it. And it's funny because he is obviously pretty aware of what people say about him. He's not one of these managers who has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, he's that classic one similar to Klopp where they go like, "Oh, I'm not on Twitter." I mean, they're both definitely got a burner account somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, he called himself Fraudiola in the past, so that nickname exists.
He's there.
Says it all, really, doesn't it? So yeah. I mean, obviously delighted with Pep. He's been brilliant for the club, and there was a point towards the beginning of last season when he signed his new contract, and we weren't playing well at all. We were really struggling. We were 7th or 8th in the table at around November time last year, and it looked like it was kind of petering out. Like we'd maybe sort of the relationship had run its course a little bit, and the players weren't really buying into what he wanted to do anymore. He didn't seem too happy. I think he's another one who the pandemic really affected him, and he was quite a bit of a downbeat demeanour at times, and then it all turned around last season. We went on to win the league, and everything's rosy in the garden again now, really. And he's got, I think, one more year after this one on his contract, and there's some talk that he might be tempted to sign on again, and that would be great if it did happen. I don't think there's a single City fan in the world who would want to see him leave anytime soon. You do wonder how long he can sustain this for, how long he can keep motivating the players and himself. But I think the conditions that he's got at City are better than he would get at any club in the world. The club was built for him to come in before he even joined. For years they were preparing the groundwork for him to come in.
Tixi and stuff.
Yeah. He can snap his fingers and get whatever he wants. Basically, money's no object. They've built the training ground up for him. They've hired whoever he wants, and he's got the staff working closely for him. I think he's pretty happy with his life in Manchester nowadays. So everything's going great. And if he can finally win us the Champions League, then that will get a few people off his back, I think, because that's the one glaring error, the one blot on his copybook of his time at City is that he's not won that. And some people would say that was the one trophy that he was brought in to deliver to City. I don't wholly subscribe to that myself. I think he was brought in to win trophies, and he's done that and been very successful and built an incredible team. Not on a shoestring budget. No one's pretended otherwise. But I think a lot of City fans would say that we've had money in the past with other managers, and they haven't got us playing like we are playing and winning trophies in the way that we have won stuff. So I think you'd have to say he's done an incredible job, and I hope this season ends successfully for him again, and we win at least one of the big trophies, and then buy him some new players in the summer and see what he can do next season.
Yeah, no, I think it's Champions League and anything to do with the Champions League is usually when you see the hashtag Fraudiola sort of bounding about, depending on sort of what's happened. And I've been in some very weird what do they call them, Twitter Spaces the past. To occasionally just go in to listen, and you just like, there are some wild folk out there, and you're just like, I've done well to curate the timeline to the way in which I have done, because I don't see half of these loonies on, whether it be Liverpool side or whether it be City side, on the best of times. But in terms of the game itself, I mean, I was just looking at some sort of promo pieces ahead of it, and people talking about the fact that these two sides have been so evenly matched. They've pushed each other on, and who knows how just how successful both would have been without the other. In terms of sort of really pushing for every point possible, keeping those standards high. I think it's 337 points since the 2018-19 season for Liverpool, 338 for Man City. So that they really are ridiculous, just like neck and neck. And I think for a lot of sides, I'm sure tribalism doesn't allow people to say it, but I think these two are pretty much all-time Premier League greats in terms of what they're doing, which of course makes Sunday very very exciting. Maybe sort of like slightly makes you want to throw up a little bit, but in terms of, I can think of clashes in the past, and I often think of that one. I think it's probably the last season where I thought Bernardo Silva was your best player, and we went to the Etihad, and I think it was that Sane goal at the end, maybe that one thing. I can't remember what. It was one where the ball was nearly millimetres over the line for Liverpool as well, and that was one of the most breathless games of football I've ever watched, actually, between two sides. And I'm almost expecting a similar thing this weekend, to be honest, because it seems as though they're both pretty full strength, and they're both in great form. They're coming off good wins. Maybe yours against Atletico more of a tiring encounter, given sort of what they ask of you. The question then, I mean, I think you've said in the past to me that you don't always know what Guardiola is going to do ahead of games like this, but I feel like you maybe do more than usual this time round. I mean, how would you expect him to approach this game against Liverpool, coming to the Etihad, knowing what's at stake?
Yeah, the obvious comparison is that one in 2018-19 that you mentioned,
just
and
a
it feels
slugfest,
like it is going to be a bit like that again. Yeah, I don't see it being much of a tactical battle this game at the weekend. I mean, I find it difficult to make any prediction about it, to be honest, because anything could happen. City could win 4-0, Liverpool could win 4-0, it could be 0-0. I wouldn't like to call it at all. It's two teams at the peak of their powers, two incredible teams, the best two teams in the world, aren't they? There's no getting around that. I don't think they are, and it's just going to come down to who is better on the day, really. And all that I think City fans ask going into these games is that Guardiola doesn't do anything stupid, really. Everyone is still very sore about his decision in the Champions League final to not play a holding midfield player, and play Ilkay Gundogan there, and that might have worked. It might have come off some of these weird brainwaves he have. Now and again they come off, and he's praised as a genius. But you just kind of think, when the stakes are so high, let's just kind of stick to what we know. And I'd like to think I can pick the City team now and say this is our best 11 at this moment in time. Yeah. This is the team we should play. But then I'll get to the ground on Sunday, and he's got Edison in midfield or something. You just don't know with Pep. So it's going to be a fantastic game. I hope so anyway. I hope it doesn't boil down to a bit of a war of attrition, because I mean, a draw would suit City quite nicely. I'd be quite happy with a draw. It means the title's still in our hands if that happens, but that then assumes that we will go on and win every game, which I don't think is a surety by any means, and I don't think it is for Liverpool either. I think I can see, I don't know if both teams are as good as they were in 2018-19, where they both went on those incredible winning runs at the end of the season. I feel like they're both a little bit more fragile and a little bit more vulnerable than they were back then. And I've watched Liverpool with a keen eye in recent weeks, and I've seen you giving away some big chances to lesser opposition. Even Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup a few weeks ago had a big chance, and I kind of think, are City going to be able to exploit those weaknesses a little bit? But obviously we've got weaknesses too, and if anyone is going to exploit those, you fear that it's going to be Liverpool. And I'm looking at Mo Salah, the fact he's not scored since the end of February from open play now, thinking, well, that's got to end soon. That's not going to go on forever, is it? So he's going to be one to watch this weekend for us, definitely. But you've got quality in every department, world class player in every position, as have City. So it's going to be a slugfest. I think, like you said, I don't think it's going to be very tactical. It's just going to be two teams going hell for leather. Hopefully, it'll be a great game for the neutral. It's going to be horrible 90 minutes for us, probably. But this is what you get into football for, and it's these games. You don't, if every trophy win was a stroll, or there weren't these big clashes to get your teeth into, then it'd be quite boring. So
yeah, exactly.
Just got to, like I said at the beginning, we've got to embrace the chaos.
Yeah, I was speaking to some Liverpool fans at the start of this month, we're in the start of this month, but just ahead of it, into the sort of this month looks difficult. It's really jam packed. There's always all these games. It's going to be tough. It's like, that's the whole point. The whole point is to get into a situation where you can potentially win. You can win it all, or you can lose it all, and you're in with a chance. And it's interesting. You say obviously you can never tell necessarily what he's gonna do, Guardiola, and there has been those previous moments you mentioned with Gundogan in Champions League final, Rodri not being there, and for me anyway, for example, looking at this game, I think I already talked about it, but for me, for months, the key thing I've been focused on is I sort of assume the back four will be there. Hopefully they'll be there, touch wood, and nothing happens. I assume some variation in the front three will be there, and it's sort of weird that we've gotten to a stage now where actually any variation on it, I could live with. I could see the original three coming in for this game, because I think Firmino will drop back and make a nuisance of himself. I could see Jota, given how he's played, coming into it. I could see Diaz, given how he was, although given he got the entirety of the game last night, maybe that's less likely. But for me, it's been Thiago and Fab. If those two can be fit and they can play, that for me has been the interesting thing of how will they deal with a midfield as strong as City's, because they are probably our two most talented midfielders. If you were looking at a section of the pitch as well, it sounds like Foden's probably going to be one of those players already. Would there be a pair that you go, okay, these two just have, as long as these two, and we don't mess around with this area of the pitch, it should be a good game.
I say that I could pick the team now, but I'm starting to have doubts myself actually thinking about it, because it's something I touched on earlier, that Guardiola has this bit of a problem at the moment where he's trying to get De Bruyne, Bernardo and Gundogan into the same team, and it's not really working. Yeah. And for me, he's got to pick two of those three players this weekend, and I would probably say that I would like it to be De Bruyne and Gundogan. Maybe have Bernardo on the bench, and we can bring him on if needs be, if something needs to change. But who knows what Pep will go with? He might go with a similar lineup to what he did against Atletico, where he gets them all in the same team, and that means that maybe Sterling starts on the bench. I would imagine after his impact on Tuesday night that Foden will start, and I'm sure he'll be well up for the game. And I'd like to see Mahrez starting as well. Defensively, there's a bit of a question mark over whether Ruben Dias is going to be fit. I think he's probably not going to be fit, so I think it's probably going to be Stones and Laporte at centre back, which is a good partnership, but not perfect. They are a little bit. Laporte in particular is a very good player, but he's a little bit error prone sometimes, and I do worry about how they would cope with Liverpool's forward line. I could imagine Jota find a little bit of space in between them. We played Southampton in the FA Cup and won 4-1 the other week, but it was a scoreline that really flattered us, and we gave quite a few chances away to Southampton that game that concerned me a little bit. The fullbacks pick themselves really, because there's only really two.
You mentioned
it'll be Cancelo left back and Walker right back. Walker was suspended against Atletico, so he'll be fresh for this one, which is
great.
Good.
Yeah.
But
Walker doing shuttle runs down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, there are a couple of areas that I'm not totally sure what he's going to do, but for the most part, the starting 11 is almost set in stone at this point.
Okay, and last question before we wrap things up. And what's your favourite memory from this fixture then, I suppose? And it can be the Etihad one, or it can be I know Anfield's not been particularly, as you mentioned.
It's probably that one in 1819, because it was an incredible game. I think people, non-City and Liverpool fans cite that as one of the best Premier League games there has ever been in terms of technical quality and two teams going at it. There was drama, there was that goal line clearance, there was us taking the lead, and then Liverpool equalising, and then City going back in front and Liverpool nearly equalising at the end. And obviously that turned the title race around as well, because that was a real 6 points of that game. If Liverpool had won that, I think you would have pulled away and won the league that year.
Yeah.
We won it and were able to reel you back in. And the atmosphere at the Etihad isn't often brilliant. I'll be the first to admit that, but it was that night. It was absolutely superb and really loud and really passionate. So I'm expecting the same this weekend. Prior to that, I would say in terms of Anfield games, as I mentioned earlier, I don't really count the 4-1 we got there last season, because
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I really would have beat you in front of your fans really someday. And the last time we did that was 2003 with Nicholas Anelka scoring the winning goal. So
wow,
it's been a long time coming, yeah. So we've not had many happy days at Anfield, that's for sure.
No, that was the one saving grace of just how we did not, it was not fun. not a fun thing. And it was even the one beforehand, I think when we'd won the title and you beat us as well, you could sort of excuse that because you're like, they're all drunk or whatever. But even though the manager came out, I was like, no, absolutely, they were focused. They was like, no, come on. You could see some of the stuff that you saw Robertson do in that game was evidence that he had been, he'd been out on one, I think. But
enjoying it a bit too much. But Liverpool's record at the Etihad is actually pretty poor, isn't it?
It's pretty bad. Yeah,
it's another thing that kind of makes me think, well, that can't go on forever. Like the law of averages dictates that you're probably due a win. So that's a bit of a fear of mine going into this weekend. Yeah,
I mean, I will lean on those probability guys before kickoff. I'm sure that somebody will come out and go, yeah, right, yeah, just by the law of averages, it needs to be. But I think my overall thing is I'm hoping that both sides fully fit, they could just go at it, and that Mr. Tierney, Mr. Taylor, please just keep yourself out of it if you can. Do the basics and let us both enjoy it. But as always, Dan, again, thank you very much for coming on and giving us your opinion and your insight on City this season. I think it's been, as you've described, like it's an interesting incarnation of City this, without feeling like it's necessarily the vintage City, but they could easily go and win nearly all of it if everything clicks into gear for them. So I'm sure it's going to be a agonizing and sort of exciting game this Sunday as well. But thank you very much for coming on. Was there anything that you wanted to plug before you do go? I know you're sort of regularly on the Blue Moon yourself. Is there going to be I'm assuming there's going to be a bunch of previews before the game this weekend as well?
There is. I'm not doing the podcast this week, but if you want to listen to the Blue Moon podcast, you can do that. There was an interesting episode a couple of weeks ago with a very long chat, a little bit like this one with Neil Atkinson from the Anfield Rat, which I'm sure you know him well. So that's worth a listen. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at FussballDan on Twitter, and that's it. Just to finish, actually, I've got a colleague at work who's a Liverpool fan, Joel Sanderson-Murray, and we were chatting about the end of the season and the expectations for both teams a few weeks ago, and we both shook hands on a deal that would see City winning the Premier League and the FA Cup this season, and Liverpool winning the Champions League and the Carabao Cup. Is that a deal that would suit you? Do you think, or do you want it all? Are you
no, I don't want it all by any stretch. I mean, I think I'm realistic, and I don't think I think it'd be very difficult to do that. But no, for me, but people ask me this as well. For me, it would be the league because the fact that we weren't able to do it in front of fans, like you mentioned, in terms of like to have that moment of catharsis. It's sort of a weird one in that I'm on the younger side anyway, but I'd never seen Liverpool win a title, and it meant a lot. But I feel like I'm sure there's a big afternoon or sort of evening of crying that I've not done that would sort of rear its head if it did happen, and I'd quite like to get that over and done with so I could just move on. So I think it would probably be that, and I was due to go up to Liverpool with my dad and spend the weekend there and maybe see a parade that never happened and things like that. So if that was to happen, I've got all the tickets booked, everything's ready for the last game of the season. So however it ends, I'm sure it'll be it's already been a great season anyway. But if I could pick one, I'd go for the league, and I'd give City their long elusive Champions League glory.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes to that, I'll take that as well. And you never know. Your old mate Steven Gerrard might do you a favour at the Etihad on the final day of the season, because we've got Aston Villa at home last game of the season. So there's some omens there, isn't there?
We've got that rescheduled game against Villa as well. So yeah, he absolutely better know his role, as The Rock would say. Said many years ago. But thank you so much again, Dan, for coming on. And just to all those listeners who've been tuning in to Rival Recon throughout the season. Always good when we're doing this show that the games are relevant, and thanks to this side, they're remaining relevant in the league this time round again. So it's going to be a very exciting run-in, as I'm sure you're all well aware at this stage. And games coming thick and fast, and there'll be that return game against Benfica at Anfield on the 13th, and then there's the City game on the FA Cup. The 16th, and then I'll be back for another episode ahead of that small little clash against I think Dan described them as trash, but I can't remember, to Manchester United on the 19th of April. So I'll see you then. But until then, do check out all the other great content on Anfield Index Pro. But otherwise, don't bite your nails too much, and we'll see you again ahead of United.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.